Alright, today we're going to talk about one of the biggest, I think aside from common use, this is one of the biggest things I saw in all of the grammar evaluations. It's just misplaced and dangling modifiers. Now how many of y'all know what I'm talking about when I say modifiers? Anybody? Alright, well let's read through. What's that? Kind of like an appositive, because appositives are used to describe something, but this is just usually just, it's kind of a word, it says a word, phrase, or clause. So it can be anything. It's not necessarily just a certain type of phrase, and it's even not necessarily just a certain type of word. It can be a word, phrase, or clause, anything that is describing something else. It's just something that serves to describe. So, a misplaced modifier is a word, phrase, or clause that is improperly separated from the word it modifies or describes. So, that's what a misplaced modifier is. We're going to talk about misplaced and dangling modifiers. We're going to talk about misplaced first. So that's what a misplaced one is. It's just improperly separated from the thing it's describing. And I love how they describe it. They say, because of the separation, sentences with this error often sound awkward, ridiculous, or confusing. And it does it in there. Furthermore, they can be downright illogical. So that's your risk when, if you're writing, if you have a misplaced modifier, like your reader a lot of times will be reading and just go like, wait, what? Like if you read the sentence, someone read the first sentence in the box as an example. Lucy, read the box. First sentence in the box first.
On her way home, Jen found a gold man's watch.
Yeah, and so if we were talking in conversation, you know, I found a gold man's watch, and you'd be like, oh, that's cool, like you found a gold watch on the road, that's, you know, good for you, maybe you can sell it, I don't know. But when you're reading it, a lot of times you're not able to, all the other nonverbal cues are not there, and so when you're reading it, all you have is the words, right? On her way home, Jan found a gold man's watch. And if you read that, you're thinking, well, it could be a watch that belongs to a gold man, or it could be a gold, like men's watch, I don't know. So, how would we correct that? You can look in the paper, I don't care. And how would you correct that so that it's specific to the gold is describing what it needs to describe?
On her way home, Jane found a gold men's watch.
That still is separating the modifier from what it's describing. So how
I
would you...
was just putting like the...
That honestly, using men's would make more sense, but in this case, how would we correct it so that the modifier is next to what it's modifying?
On her way home, Jen found a man's gold watch.
A man's gold watch. So we know that it's a man's watch that is gold. So it's not a gold man's watch, it's a man's gold watch. There we go. So there's different kinds of misplaced modifiers. I'm just going to write down the titles of each up here. The first one is just misplaced adjectives. Misplaced adjectives. And so that's exactly what it sounds. Adjectives that are in the wrong place. Someone read the sentence in the first example in this section in the box. Anybody?
The child ate a cold dish of cereal for breakfast this morning.
Yeah, the child ate a cold dish of cereal for breakfast this morning. Now, in conversation, like honestly, I said, oh yeah, I had a hot cup of coffee this morning. Like, we just say that, and it's not a big deal. But if you're reading this, what does this adjective cold describe? The dish. It's describing the dish and not the cereal. And sometimes, maybe the dish is cold, and you're wanting to say the dish is cold. Okay, fine. But he's wanting to specify that he's eating cold cereal. Because you all know there's hot cereal and cold cereal, and hot cereal is not nearly as common. Bless you. Hot cereal is not nearly as common, so we don't really talk about it much. But if you're wanting to specify, yeah, he ate cold cereal, like pour it in the bowl, Lucky Charms with some milk, like cold cereal. And so that would be corrected too. The child ate a dish of cold cereal for breakfast this morning. Because he's wanting the cold to be modifying the cereal, not the dish. And so I think there's some more examples of this. Yeah, if you flip to the next page. Now this one is one where, yeah, you would need to change it. Unless, I mean, again, it all depends on what you're learning about. So it says, the torn student's book lay on the desk. So let's say the student is just really, the student is just ripped up about something. Something is eating up the student and they are struggling. Then the student would be torn. But in most cases, what we're talking about is the second corrected sentence. The student's torn book lay on the desk. So again, it all depends on what the meaning is intended to be, and what the meaning most logically sounds like it should be. Like when you're correcting these things with the Iowa test, it'll be pretty obvious examples of, it won't be something where, oh, well, it could be either or. No, it'll be pretty obvious that this needs to be modifying this and not that. So always make sure that your modifiers, even in your own writing, that's outside of the Iowa test, make sure that your modifiers are describing the words they need to be describing. Alright, the next one is placement of adverbs. Now, adverbs are typically usually they're like ly words, hopefully, or slowly, but sometimes they can be like just. Just means only. So there's certain things, adjectives are kind of funny words, there's different types of adjectives, or not adjectives, than adverbs. So the placement of adverbs can change meaning in sentences. So for example, just is an adverb in this sense, and if we read it, it says, just John was picked to host the program. So if we read the first one, what does just mean in that sentence? First sentence, only. Just John was picked. No one else was picked, just John. Alright, but if we move it to a different place, where it says John was just picked to host the program, what does that mean?
Like right now, he was just picked.
He was just picked for this program, yeah. And then, if we move it to another place, John was picked to host just the program, what do we have now?
He wasn't hosting anything else but the program.
Nothing else but the program. Yeah, so you can see how, while neither of these is technically wrong on its own, depending on what you're trying to say, one of these could be wrong. If you put just in the wrong place, you're giving the wrong message to your reader. So that's something to keep an eye on. Yeah, because it says at the bottom, it says each of these sentences says something quite logical, but it's different. And its correctness depends on what the writer has in mind. Now we're going to talk about when you misplace an adverb, when it can start getting a little ridiculous. Someone read the first box under the second section that we're in, if you're following along. Sorry, the we ate one. Someone read it.
We ate the lunch that we had brought slowly.
We ate the lunch that we had brought slowly. Alright. What's slowly here?
Slowly bringing the lunch.
We ate the lunch that we had brought slowly. So if you're looking at this, you brought it slowly, so it's like, alright. I'm going to slowly bring my lunch. No, that doesn't make any sense at all. So, if we want to modify it correctly, we would need to put slowly right before the verb that it needs to modify, which is ate. We slowly ate the lunch that we had brought. I hope there's nothing we can see. Right. Okay. Yeah, so I guess one of the, I hope y'all are seeing the trend here that the main thing you need to make sure when you're writing is that you're describing words are just next to what they describe. Because it's easy to split things apart. I think misplaced modifiers a lot of times are easier to catch than the dangling modifiers, which we'll get to in a minute. So I think, okay, yeah, we'll do the final one on this page. At the bottom of the second page, it says, watch out for adverbs such as only, just, nearly, or almost. often misplaced and cause an unintended meaning. So, I guess it's kind of a similar concept. It says, I only contributed $10 to the fund for orphan children. So, when you say, I only contributed $10, we a lot of times would say that, like if you're saying, yeah, I only gave $10. I didn't give a whole lot because I'm kind of broke, but I only gave $10. But in that sentence, only is modifying, technically it's modifying my, or I. I only contributed $10. So the way that you could correct that is, I contributed only $10 to the fund for orphan children. You'll see the correction on the next page. So the key here, and I don't know if, I've said a few times before how, in conversational English, a lot of these rules, we aren't sticklers with these rules. Like, and the people who are kind of the worst, let's be honest. The people who are always like, you meant my dad and I. Like, no. Those people are kind of the worst. But in writing, it's important to get into the habit of looking for these things. You're not going to write exactly like you speak. You're not. I don't write like I speak. I feel like a different person when I write. Like, when I read my papers, it's like, I don't actually say that in real life. I'm kind of casual when it comes to speaking in general. I'm not a formal speaker. But in writing, I've kind of always just trained myself to write formally based on just years and years of academic writing. So, the main thing here, y'all, is just start training yourselves to write academically. And so then the last one is misplaced phrases. We'll go over those briefly and then start doing technical modifiers. Misplaced phrases. Alrighty, misplaced phrases may cause a sentence to sound awkward and may create a meaning that does not make sense. So the whole gist of this, guys, is if your modifiers are not next to what they need to be modifying, it just doesn't make sense. So, let's look at example 1. The dealer sold the Cadillac to the buyer with leather seats. The buyer has leather seats? Or the Cadillac, we don't know, but it implies that the buyer has leather seats, which isn't true. So we need to correct it to, the dealer sold the Cadillac with leather seats to the buyer. Because right here the little phrase is with leather seats. And with leather seats needs to be next to what has the leather seats, which isn't the buyer, it's the Cadillac. So the dealer sold the Cadillac with leather seats to the buyer. Example 2, the 3 bankers talked quietly in the corner smoking pipes. Just saying that conversationally, you can assume, yeah, the bankers are the ones who are smoking it. But if you're just reading it, it doesn't follow that logic. So in order to correct that, we would need to put whoever is smoking the pipes. Smoking pipes is our misplaced phrase. We need to put whoever's smoking the pipes next to who's smoking the pipes, which is the bankers, not the corner. Corners can't smoke pipes. And then, yeah, the third example is exactly the same. They saw a fence behind the house made of barbed wire. That's not true, because the house wasn't made of barbed wire. How does that mean? If you can make a house out of barbed wire, good for you, but I wouldn't want to live there. You change it to, they saw a fence made of barbed wire behind the house. Alright, so just make sure your phrases, adjectives, all that stuff is modifying. Here are misplaced clauses. It's basically the same concept, okay? The same concept here, guys. The waiter served the dinner roll to the woman that was well buttered. Okay, no. The waiter served the dinner roll that was well buttered to the woman. Actually, before we keep going with this, clauses. Tell me what a clause is. Any ideas? Clauses are basically any sort of phrase that has subject-verb in it. And they can be dependent or independent, as we've learned. Independent ones are complete sentences on their own. I watched the movie. But dependent clauses can't stand on their own. And usually they begin with subordinators, like we learned about in some past assignments. So, clauses include, like, we're looking at a dinner roll that was well buttered. Like there's the dinner roll and then was well buttered. Like that whole thing is a clause. So if we, misplace the clause, it becomes woman that was well buttered, which we know is not correct. And then we also have example 2, Ralph piled all of his clothes in the hamper that he had worn. You don't wear hampers, guys. You don't. I wouldn't recommend it. The correct one is Ralph piled all of his clothes that he had worn in the hamper. And then I think the last one, it just talks about in correcting a misplaced modifier, don't create a sentence with 2 possible meanings. Basically, always make sure what you're saying is clear in your sentences. Because the teacher said on Monday she would return our essays. That could go either way. If you're reading that, it could mean the teacher said it on Monday, or it could mean she would return the essays on Monday. So, instead of putting it in the middle to be specific, because you need to be specific, especially when you're dealing with deadlines and assignments and things like that, you need to know what's going on. So, you need to know if the teacher says she would return the essays on Monday, or if on Monday the teacher said she would return our essays. If she said it on Monday, maybe she's returning them later or something. Yeah. So, any questions at all about all these misplaced clauses, adjectives, adverbs? Any clarification you need on any of that? And if you find out later you do need some, just email me and I can help clear things up. So yeah, the moral of the story, y'all, is make sure your modifier is modifying what it needs to be modifying. Alright? Or else your reader is like, well, what's going on here? This makes no sense. Is it still going?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Alright, dangling modifiers. These are fun. I see these a lot more than misplaced modifiers. I guess, Now I'm talking about dangling modifiers specifically. So, a dangling modifier, when something's dangling, it's just kind of like hanging there. It's not really attached to anything. It's just dangling off the end. And that's exactly what these modifiers are. It's a phrase or clause that is not clearly and logically related to the word or words it's supposed to modify. So, unlike a misplaced modifier, a dangling modifier cannot be corrected by something moving into a different place. Because with a lot of these misplaced modifiers, you can just kind of, since it's just misplaced, you can just kind of pick it up and stick it where it needs to go. But with dangling modifiers, it's not quite the case. So if you go to the next page, on the top of it, it says, in most cases, the dangling modifier appears at the beginning of the sentence, although it can come at the end. There are a lot of these on your grammar evaluations. And not a lot of people got them. And the thing was, I noticed a lot of students, maybe they knew it was wrong, but they were like, how do I correct this? Because I saw there were a lot of people who were like, I know this doesn't sound right. They even wrote, like, sounds weird, but I can't fix it. Like, they knew it wasn't right. But there was like, yeah, I mean, there were plenty of others. You were not alone in that. Don't worry about that. Yeah, you were not alone. There were a lot of people who were just like, this makes no sense, but I don't know how to make it make sense. So I think explaining it and kind of going in depth about, okay, why is this wrong, will help us figure out how we can know how to correct it. Alright, so sometimes the dangling modifier occurs because the sentence fails to specify anything to which the modifier can refer. So, example 1. Someone read example 1.
Looking toward the west, a funnel-shaped cloud was stirred up dust.
So based on this sentence, what's looking toward the west?
A funnel-shaped cloud.
A funnel cloud. Yeah. So it says looking toward the west, a funnel cloud stirred up the dust. There's nothing in this sentence that could be looking towards the west. Like there's nothing. You have to change the sentence itself to bring in a proper subject to be modified. So how could we correct this sentence? Like you kind of have to, like we said, you can't just rearrange things. You have to rewrite the sentence. That's why I think a lot of times with grammar evaluations, with a lot of the other ones, you're just like crossing out or maybe adding punctuation. But with this one, like you can't just cross things out and rearrange them. You've got to change the whole sentence or add in whole words. words. So that's why it was a tricky question. So, how would you correct looking toward the west, a funnel-shaped cloud stirred up the dust?
Yeah.
We can bounce ideas off each other. I want to hear from everybody.
A funnel-shaped cloud stirred up dust when it looks toward the west.
That you could do that, but then that would almost indicate that when you looked, that caused the funnel-shaped cloud to stir up the dust. That's something you also have to be careful about, using whens and things like that. Because sometimes when implies cause and effect. Sometimes.
Okay.
So, yeah, what you got?
Looking toward the west, the boy saw a funnel-shaped cloud stirring up dust.
Yeah, like mainly the key here is make the subject of that main clause, like where a funnel-shaped cloud stirred up the dust. Like that's an independent clause right there. That's your main subject verb. There it is. So just make the subject of that clause a person or something with eyes that can look at the funnel-shaped cloud. So yeah, good job. I guess that you may have looked ahead to correction method 1, or you just came up with that on your own, which is great. Yeah, if you look ahead at the bottom of the page, it says correction method 1. If you go to the next page, it says looking toward the west, I saw a funnel-shaped cloud stir up the dust. So now, who's looking toward the west?
The person.
And I can look toward the west. Funnel-shaped clouds cannot look toward the west. Alright, let's look at the next sentence. When 9 years old, my mother enrolled in medical school. Alright, does this make sense?
No.
You see, when I was
No.
9 years old, my mother enrolled in that school.
Or
I think that could, yeah, when I was 9 years old, because it specifies, because when I was 9 years old is that's a dependent clause, when is a subordinator. So when I was 9 years old, my mother enrolled in medical school. So that's clear. That's a clear, I know what's going on. When I was 9 years old, my mother enrolled in medical school. And you could even, because it's an independent clause and dependent clause next to each other, you could rearrange them so that you could say, my mother enrolled in medical school when I was 9 years old. And you wouldn't need a comma then, because the dependent clause is after the independent clause. Yeah. So let's see if there's any other ways to correct the when I was 9 years old thing. Go back to the next page. Yeah, I think that's all they did. Yeah, you just put in I. When I was 9 years old. That's all you need. Alright, someone read, Chase, read the walking to the movies sentence for us.
Walking into the movies, the cloudburst drenched Jim.
Alright, according to the sentence, who's walking to the movies?
The cloud.
Cloudburst. And cloudbursts don't go see movies. Cloudbursts drench Jim. They don't walk to the movies. So, if we're going to rearrange this, how would we make this so Jim's walking to the movies and not the cloudburst?
Jim was drenched by the cloudburst.
While walking.
Maybe.
You can even, yeah, while walking to the movies, Jim was drenched by the cloudburst. Yeah, that could be one. And let's see if there's any other suggestions.
What's
Cloudburst?
Walking
A cloudburst? I don't know, maybe it's just like a...
to the movies, Jim was drenched by the cloudburst.
I think it's almost like a sunburst.
Yeah, I mean,
Sounds like it's
Sunburst?
it
spontaneous.
sounds like it's something that involves a lot of water and a lot of cloud. So he was drenched by this cloudburst. So yeah, and what y'all said made sense. Walking to the movies, Jim, or while walking, you can even say while. I like throwing in my whiles. While walking to the movies, Jim was drenched by the cloudburst. Yep. Alright, let's see. This example, the one with Priscilla in her car. Having been fixed the night before, Priscilla could use the car. Priscilla was not fixed the night before, guys. The car was. So, you need to correct it so that the car is what's modified. So, how can we do this? Because if we say having been fixed the night used
Priscilla
by
could use,
Priscilla.
Priscilla could use the car after been fixed the night before.
Or having the car fixed, you know. It's
The thing is, one of the things you have to start thinking about here is you don't want to use passive speech. And we haven't gone into this really in depth yet in English yet, but passive speech is basically when you say, when we say I was drenched by the cloudburst, instead of that you can say the cloudburst drenched me. Because then there's no was, it's just a little more straightforward. Let's give another example. Let's see. The table was folded by Teddy. The table was folded by Teddy. So we could say that, or we could say Teddy folded the table, because that makes a lot more sense. Like it flows better. We have the subject, the person who's doing the action, in the front of the sentence. So let's try not to make the car the subject, because Priscilla's using the car. Alright, so we have, having been fixed the night before, Priscilla can use the car. So what were y'all's suggestions as to how to fix this? I know y'all had some thoughts. What were they again?
The car having been fixed the night before.
Let's try to make the subject, let's keep the subject as Priscilla, but we may have to change the having been fixed the night before thing, can be changed. We can change the phrasing of that.
Priscilla could use the car for it having been fixed the night before.
You could say that. Priscilla can now use the car for she or the mechanic, for the mechanic fixed it the night before. Yeah. Because then you have the pronoun it describing the car. You know that it's describing the car. Yeah, so honestly there's a lot of ways you can fix this. You can get really creative. But the way they suggest it is, let's see, it's one of the very last things on this document. It says, since the car had been fixed the night before, Priscilla could use it. Because when you say having been fixed the night before, there's no mention in that clause about what's been fixed. It's the same thing about when I was 9 years old, or when 9 years old, my mom enrolled in medical school. Like, if you can just throw in whatever the pronoun or whatever the subject of that phrase is, if you can throw it in there, a lot of times that's all you need. So if we said, since the car had been fixed the night before, Priscilla could use it. Because at that point, we've specified that the car is what was fixed the night before. All right. I just realized I didn't write anything on the board for this, but I think because it's so much of just like understanding the concept more than having to write down sentences. The main thing I want you all to get out of this is, all right, the main takeaways up here. So for misplaced modifiers, make sure your modifier, your adjectives, clauses, phrases, adverbs, whatever is describing. Make sure that they are next to what they are. Make sure they're next to what they're describing. And in all of this, guys, just try read sentences aloud. Read them aloud and read them slowly. So, like, if you're ever unsure, if you've written a sentence and you're like, wait, I'm not sure if this quite sounds right, or you can just have someone else read it, that can help you figure out if what you wrote makes sense. Because we've learned how when you write something initially, of course you think it sounds great because you wrote it. Like, whenever I write something, it'll sound fine and dandy, but then my mom will read over it and she's like, I have no idea what you mean in this sentence. Like, please elaborate. So it's the same sort of thing. So make sure all your describing words, your adjectives, clauses, phrases, adverbs, but make sure that they're next to what they're describing. Because if there's space in between it, it means it's misplaced and it's modifying something else that it shouldn't be modifying. And then with dangling modifiers, again, it's a similar concept. Except, you may have to rewrite the whole sentence to get it to make sense. It's not as simple as just picking it up and moving it somewhere else. Let's see. They summarize it in a nice way I can write on the board. Let's see. Retaining modifiers. Again, just make sure, it's basically the same concept, it's just it's a little bit different in practice. Yeah, just make sure whenever you have a modifier, like looking toward the west, make sure that it's about whatever is actually looking toward the west and not a funnel cloud stirred up the dust, because that doesn't make sense. Yeah, I don't know if there's any sort of nice summarization for dangling modifiers as much as for displaced. But the concept is the same. I think y'all understand. Make sure the dangling modifier isn't dangling. Make sure it is modifying something. That's basically the gist of that. So I'll talk about briefly this your worksheet for this week, the misplaced dangling modifier worksheet. It's this single sheet right here. So it has two parts, misplaced modifiers first and dangling modifiers second. So what I'd like you to do is, because sometimes you may have to read, especially for the dangling modifiers, you may have to reword sentences completely. Just get a separate sheet of paper, separate sheet of notebook paper, or you can type it out. Whatever works best for you. Or just a fresh Word document or a fresh sheet of paper. Number them, part 1, question 1, and part 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then part 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Just so I know which one you're referring to. Make sure they're numbered. And just rewrite them on a different sheet of paper, making it correctly modified. So I'll just go through the first one of each so you kind of know what's going on. For misplaced modifiers, the first question is, a wind blew across the field. It was cold and blustery. So I'll write this one up on the board. Alright. A wind.
A cold and blustery wind blew across the field.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly right. Because if we have here a wind blew across the field that was cold and blustery, it implies that what is cold and blustery?
The field.
The field, which is not true. And so yeah, if you say a cold and blustery wind blew across the field.
Okay, I have a question. Would this be correct if it was like a positive and you said a wind that was cold and blustery blew across the field?
Yeah, you could say that too.
And then put it as a positive in it.
I mean, even, I guess in that case, if you say a wind that was cold and blustery, you wouldn't really need commas for that.
Okay.
A wind that was cold and blustery blew across the field. But you could avoid having to say that was just by saying a cold and blustery wind. Yeah, like there's certain words that, and sometimes you need to use them, but sometimes if you can avoid them, it's just making it more as concise as possible. I just thought I have a really good meme about conciseness that I'll show y'all when we get to that. But anyway, sorry, sidetracked. Yeah, a lot of times if you're trying to write concisely, wait, how many of y'all are doing your datagrams, right?
Yes.
Right? Yes, Mrs. Clark, I'm doing my datagrams. The sentence combining function of those, I always kind of hated those a little bit when I was younger. I did not like doing them because they were hard sometimes. Some of them were simple, and it's like, oh, I feel so smart, I combine all these into a sentence. But sometimes they are hard, and because you're trying to combine all the sentences into one sentence. One
I
sentence.
hate it when they give you 4 sentences.
Yes, but then the key there is they're wanting you to think critically and think, all right, how can I combine these in a way so that it makes sense, so I'm modifying everything correctly, and so that I can write it as concisely as possible. So I mean, you can have some really long, kind of hard hard to follow sentence. It may still be grammatically correct, but it's hard to follow. The key is concise writing. So those are really good practice. Like, there were sometimes I would sit there and think forever, and I just couldn't think of anything. So that's when you go look and see how they wrote it. And sometimes that's the best thing you can do, is just be like, oh, okay, I see now. I've kind of learned that in this case I can modify things this way and save words by using this word here. Anyway, those things they're hard, but they're really, really good. Because once you learn, like learning all these things about commas, sentence structure, misplaced statement modifiers, once you learn like how all this works, it frees you up. It makes actual writing so much easier. Because you're able to think, okay, here's my information that I have. I'm trying to describe this building in Italy, and I have this information, and I'm trying to say it all in one sentence. And so once you know how all this works, you're able to say, okay, well, I could say, built in 1685, this cathedral, this something cathedral, you can use our words to describe it, is a, what's the word, monument to so-and-so's achievement, or something like that, like, I don't know. So when you know these rules, you can take, okay, I have this information, how can I make this make sense? Anyway, so yeah, a cold, all that to say, a cold, blustery wind. You can say cold and blustery, or you can say a cold, blustery wind. Cold, blustery wind blew across the field. And then part 2, question 1. At the age of 10, my parents took me to Disney World. How does that not make sense?
Your parents are 10?
Your parents are not 10. Alright, so yeah, how would you correct that?
My parents took me to Disney World when I was at the age of 10.
Or you could say when I was 10 years old. Yeah.
Yeah.
So whatever works most efficiently and concisely is the best way to do it. So yeah, you'll see kind of how for misplaced you may be able to just move things, but for daily modifiers, use suspension. I would say just go ahead and rewrite all of them, but at least with this it'll mostly just be copying it over and just moving something a little bit. But with these you'll have to rephrase the entire sentence. So once you do that, just send me your document or like a scan if you wrote it down, and I'll look over it and send you back feedback so you can kind of be, just as soon as you're done, just send it to me and I'll send it back to you so we can at least
Send
have
that piece of paper.
No, what your rewritten portion when you rewrite the sentence. Yeah.
And could I just use the Genius scan?
If you want
I've
to,
already got that on my phone, and that's what I usually do.
yeah, if you want to write it down and you want to, all I'm saying is it needs to be on. Don't use this sheet when you're writing things. Like you reference this because it has the questions, but use a separate sheet of paper because there's not much space on here at all.
When I was younger, that's what I tried to do. I cram all my writing on the same piece of paper.
Yeah.
When I was younger, or math, I didn't like graph paper.
Oh, yeah, graph. I don't know. Graph paper's fun.
So I told I didn't like that. I cram it all in.
I don't use graph paper.
But yeah, all I have to say, guys, you can use notebook paper and just make sure you label part 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or you can even just say misplaced modifiers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or, and then have part 2, it can be on a separate page, whatever, I don't care, but as long as it's specified, part 1, part 2, and you have them numbered, and just rewrite them so that they make sense, so that the modifiers are correct. And then you also have another comma sheet, which I'm assuming you've all packed up already. Yeah, use that, do that again. You can send me a scan of that one if you want, so I can give you feedback, otherwise just bring it back next week. Actually, you know what? Yeah, just send me a scan of that one, because we won't really have time to go over next week. So yeah, send me scans of your worksheets, and I can go over them and send you back feedback. And let me know if you have any questions about anything. And y'all are good to go. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.